Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with the latest on the push to end the war in Ukraine. The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin held, quote, very useful talks with White House envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. But once again, those discussions ended without a breakthrough to end the fighting. Tony Halpin leads Bloomberg's Russia coverage.
They said there were constructive discussions, very informative. They talked about receiving more detailed documents from the US that they need to study. But there was little actual substance on which they agreed. And Kremlin policy aide Yuri Ushakov basically told reporters that there were crucial areas such as the territorial question on which they didn't agree and that there would be much more work needed.
Bloomberg's Tony Halpin reports attention now turns to a NATO foreign ministers meeting today in Brussels to discuss the alliance's support for Ukraine. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is not expected to attend.
Well, back in Washington, Nathan, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is speaking for the first time about a suspected drug boat strike that has him facing accusations of possible war crimes. During a White House cabinet meeting heard live on Bloomberg Radio, Hegseth said he wasn't watching when a Navy admiral ordered a second strike on the vessel on September 2nd.
As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting.
Secretary Hegseth says he learned the full sequence of events a couple hours later, and he says Admiral Frank Bradley made the right call to sink the boat and eliminate the threat. Not all lawmakers are convinced. Ted Lieu is vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus.
I served on active duty as a JAG for 4 years and then an additional 21 years in the reserves. And let me be very clear. Killing shipwreck survivors is a war crime.
And Republican Senator Tom Tillis is calling the second strike a violation of ethical, moral, and legal code. The top Republican and Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee plan to meet with Admiral Bradley tomorrow.
Karen, we have some key election results this morning. Yes, it was an election day. A couple races that drew national attention. Let's bring in Bloomberg's John Tucker to get the details. John.
And Nathan, a special election in Tennessee allows Republicans to keep their razor-thin majority in Congress. The winner, Matt Van Epps, had no apologies for being hardcore MAGA.
This is President Trump's party. I'm proud to be a part of it and can't wait to get to work.
Van Epps receiving 54% of the vote to Democrat challenger Afton Bain's 45, a margin of 9 points. Not as great as some would have thought for a region President Trump won by 22 points. For Bain, it signals a future of change.
And we may not have won tonight, but we changed the story of what's possible here. And we're not done. Not by a long shot.
Well, the special election was called to fill the vacant seat once held by now former Congressman Mark Green, a Republican who resigned in July. And in another race that gained national attention in New Jersey, a runoff election for mayor of Jersey City. City Council member James Sullivan won the race, beating former Governor Jim McGreevey. Shortly after the polls closed, Sullivan was leading with 69% of the vote, according to the AP, which called the race. Sullivan pledging to make the city more affordable and to fight corruption. Similar promises to those made by New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. Well, the Trump administration is poised to undo Biden-era fuel efficiency standards, which it blames for driving up the cost of new cars. And Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
The administration is expected to propose standards that are less stringent than those finalized under former President Biden. The move is the latest in President Trump's push to dismantle policies he criticizes as an EV mandate. The Trump administration has argued that artificially high fuel economy requirements have pushed the price of a new car out of reach for many Americans. Still, easing fuel economy requirements is not likely to bring down car prices because car makers plan those lineups years in advance. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thank you. We're expecting that announcement from the president later today, but President Trump says he plans to announce his selection to lead the Federal Reserve early next year. At that cabinet meeting at the White House yesterday, the president teased White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett as his possible choice.
I guess a potential Fed chair is here, too. I don't know. Are we allowed to say that? Potential. He's a respected person, that I can tell you. Thank you, Kevin.
Now, the comments from President Trump offer a clearer timeline for that announcement, which he said would come after considering around 10 candidates.
Well, Nathan, we turn to the markets where futures are higher again following yesterday's gains on Wall Street. The S&P 500 has rallied for more than a week on an expected rate cut 1 week from today. Laura Cooper is a global investment strategist at Nuveen.
Historically, we do tend to see December as a strong month of outperformance for U.S. equities. And I think we're probably in for some modest upside, but I think there's limited scope for significant gains because a lot of the driver of recent price action has been that repricing of the Fed rate cut that's expected next week.
Nuveen's Laura Cooper says the Fed's outlook on future rate cuts will be key for the markets.
In some company news this morning, Karen, we're watching shares of CrowdStrike. They're down about 2% in early trading. The cybersecurity provider did top earnings estimates, but its outlook disappointed some investors. CrowdStrike was up 51% this year before that earnings release.
And looking at the flip side, Nathan, shares of Marvell Technology, they're up about 10%. The company announced plans to acquire startup Celestial AI for at least $3.25 billion. It's part of Marvell's push to capture more of the runaway spending on artificial intelligence computing.
And Bitcoin's trading at a 2-week high this morning, Karen. Right now up about 1.6% at 93,000. Cryptocurrency seeking a sustained recovery from a weeks-long sell-off that began in early October, days after Bitcoin hit a record of more than 126,000. Since then, more than $1 trillion in crypto market value has been wiped out.
We have a warning here, Nathan, from the SEC. It has issued a flurry of letters to firms including Direction, ProShares, and Tidal, blocking the introduction of products designed to deliver 2 or 3 times the daily returns of stocks, commodities, and cryptocurrencies. The SEC's concern is that the fund's risk exposures may exceed the agency's limits on how much risk a fund can take on relative to its assets. The regulator has directed the fund managers to either revise their investment strategies or formally withdraw their applications.
And it is an unprecedented philanthropic effort, Karen. Dell Technologies founder Michael Dell and his wife Susan are giving 25 million American children $250 each to jumpstart investment accounts for their future. That adds up to $6.25 billion, a pledge that's part of the Invest America initiative, better known as Trump accounts, that were created earlier this year under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Michael Dell discussed the pledge in a Bloomberg interview.
We do think that this will be catalytic and that more philanthropists and companies will join us over time. And again, this is a platform for the future of these children.
And you can watch our full interview with Dell Technologies founder and CEO Michael Dell at the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube.
Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The cleanup continues in the Midwest and Northeast from a snowstorm. In Nashua, New Hampshire, the city's street department has been working to keep the roads clear of snow. This man was out driving and found things a bit difficult.
It was raining, so the roads were already wet, and then the snow just came up on top of it. So you can't really see the black ice.
New York City just got rain, but the central Hudson River Valley got about 9 inches of snowfall. The Pennsylvania police officer who arrested accused CEO killer Luigi Mangione appeared in a New York City court. Officer Joseph Detweiler testified on day 2 of Mangione's hearing to bar New York prosecutors from using evidence they say links him to the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a Manhattan street. Officer Detweiler testified he was skeptical about the tip about a male who looks like the shooter, but as soon as the man pulled down his mask, the officer said, "I knew it was him immediately." Detweiler said Mangione gave him a fake name and ID and claimed he was homeless. The Trump administration says it will withhold funds for administering SNAP food aid in most Democratic-controlled states starting next week unless they provide data about those receiving the assistance. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said that the action is looming because those states are refusing to provide requested information about the recipients, including their names and immigration status.
But 21 states, including California, New York, and Minnesota, the blue states, continue to say no.
Secretary Rollins says it's necessary that states comply to root out fraud in the program. Democratic states have sued to block the requirement. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
Thanks, Michael. Time now for our Bloomberg Sports Update, and for that, we bring in John Stashower.
Thanks, Karen. On Sunday, we'll find out who's going to the college football playoff. The committee says that as of now, there'll be 5 SEC teams, 3 from the Big Ten, and the byes go to Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, and Texas Tech. Kalani Sitake decided to stay at BYU rather than take the job at Penn State. Oklahoma City Thunder with a 124-112 win at Golden State. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scored 38 points. The Thunder, the defending NBA champs, off to a 21-1 start. That's your Bloomberg Sports Update.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak coming up after this.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Very useful, very informative. Those are some of the words the Kremlin is using to describe the latest talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says he's waiting to hear the results.
If I feel that we can count on real specific dialogue, not just words, with some result, we will meet.
That was Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky speaking in Ireland ahead of the nearly 5-hour talks in Moscow. Joining us for more is Bloomberg opinion columnist Mark Champion. Mark, good morning. Did we hear real specific action coming out of those talks? Good morning.
Good morning. No. In essence, the message, all that we know about the talks so far has come from the Russian side. One of President Putin's advisors explained what went on, and his message essentially was, this was good, we liked it, but there was no progress. We looked at the plan that the Americans had, the altered plan that's been, made since the Russian-American plan was initially put forward. We looked at the altered plan, but we were focused really on the kind of spirit of the deal. We didn't get into the nitty-gritty, and there's stuff in there. Some of it we might be able to accept, some of the changes, but some of some big key things that we are not, and we see quite negatively. So, it's pretty clear there won't be a big summit between Trump and Putin to announce a deal anytime soon. Whether this can actually move forward, it really depends on how the Americans play it, and whether there was any sign of real movement from the Russians, because that initial deal with the 28 points that the Russians still like to sort of, lean on, that one was really poison for the Ukrainian side and for their European allies.
And we've heard from President Zelensky on X this morning saying his defense secretary, Rustem Umerov, is going to meet with national security advisors to European leaders in Brussels today following these discussions. Where is Europe in all this, Mark?
Well, they are important in the sense that Ukraine, they're only Ukraine's only true allies at this point. The U.S. is, posed itself as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine, which means it's distanced itself from supporting Ukraine. And it also has its own interests. You can see that, threaded through those 28 points. There are American profits to be made, American deals to be made. If you look at who is negotiating the deal on behalf of the Americans, it's a real estate developer, Steve Witkoff, and then Jared Kushner, who is a son-in-law to the president, but also primarily a businessman. And a lot, on the other side, for the Russian side, one of the key players in negotiating, key partner for Witkoff has been Kirill Dmitriev, who runs the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund. So this is, on the Americans are trying to negotiate a deal that resets relations in a way that's economically beneficial to the U.S. The Ukrainian issue for them is secondary. It needs to get dealt with, but it isn't actually the primary issue for the Americans. It remains the primary issue for Europe because Ukraine is a vital security interest for the Europeans just because of geography.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.